Hi, this is Fred Copestake, your host to the Selling Through Partnering Skills podcast. Based on the book, the podcast explores how sales professionals can use the power of partnering intelligence to take their selling to the next level. By combining the skills associated with better partnering and existing best practice, salespeople can ensure their approach is more modern and collaborative. There are 6 elements to PQ, and in each episode we look at how sales professionals have used these and how their insights can contribute to your success. And hello, welcome to this next episode of Selling Through Partnering Skills. Today I have with me Erin Evans, who is the Sales Enablement Director at Global Data. Erin, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Well, no, it's an absolute pleasure. So, do you have weather outside?
You've been reading my LinkedIn post, haven't you?
I have, and you know what? That really did make me giggle quite a lot. Could you just explain what on earth I'm talking about?
Yeah,
People
of
are
course.
listening.
So I posted on LinkedIn the other day a sort of hypothetical conversation between a rep and a prospect, and it started the rep saying, "Hi, just to check, do you have weather outside?" And the prospect says yes, and the rep goes, "Oh my God, me too, fantastic. Now let's talk about business." And it was sort of interestingly touching on probably what we're going to talk about today around trust, around these really cheap tactics that salespeople do to build rapport by talking about the weather. Because it's obviously clearly like the one thing you have in common with everyone in the world. So it's an easy thing to talk about, but it can come across really transparent. So I was just recommending that people should mix it up a bit and talk about different things.
I thought I had to start with that. It really did. Those you're actually giggling to yourself. I was doing that literally. So thank you actually for doing that. That really brightened my day. But proper welcome. Could you just give us a little bit more about yourself rather than the person who posts amusing stuff on LinkedIn?
Yeah, sure. So obviously my name is Erin Evans. I work for an organization called Global Data as the basic director of sales enablement. We're the fastest growing business intelligence company on the London Stock Exchange. My role is sales enablement. I probably lean more towards the trainer coach side of sales enablement as opposed to some of the sales operational side of sales enablement. But I've had a very interesting career that's seen me travel quite a lot of the world in my role, worked for some really interesting organizations, IPO'd an organization in Australia. And I've been very lucky in my career where almost every company I've worked for has backed me to either improve my skills through qualifications or given me the ability to embed some really interesting new work. So I've been very, very lucky in that sense. And it's also given me the joy of talking to people like yourself around some interesting stuff that I've learned along the way in my career. So again, really excited to talk to you about some of the wonderful stuff that you're coming out with as well.
Oh, brilliant. Oh, well, cheers, Erin. Let's get stuck in then. No more kind of stupid rapport for the sake of rapport building questions, and then let's get down to some of the valuable stuff there. And so, as people who have listened to this will know, I will go through kind of each of the elements of PQ and just ask you how you sort of feel about these, and more importantly, as a trainer, as a coach, how you're able to help salespeople develop this and bring it into the way that they operate.
Sure.
And for me, the obvious starting point is always trust. It being the foundation of all relationships. Without trust, no communication. And so, yeah, let's start there. You know, how would you help a salesperson to develop that?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's one of the key things that needs to punctuate the whole sales process with almost every stakeholder that you speak to. And I think a lot of it starts with authenticity. And I always find it really interesting because one of the questions I get asked a lot, probably more so by seasoned reps versus younger, less jaded reps, is how do you kind of hack trust, or how do you kind of, shortcut trust? And I always find that such an interesting question because I just bring it back to their personal life and how do you do it in your personal life? And the answer is, well, you can't, because I think there's a degree of authenticity and truth that needs to come out to actually, eventually garner that trust. So when we look at it in the way that I train trust, I think, and it's really interesting you mentioned about that first point, around talking about the weather outside, and it's really transparent as a cheap tactic to build rapport, and out of rapport comes trust. So I always tell people to just truly be themselves, which I know sounds like a really sort of banal, almost self-helpy sort of comment, but let's break it down. So you've been given the sales process, which is the how to do things, right? And then you've been given a sales methodology the sales process is what you do. Sales methodology is how you do it. But the coat that's got to hang on the coat hanger of that structure is you, yourself, and your personality. And the individual needs to truly be themselves. And I always recommend this when, particularly in the questioning stage, the closer you can get a conversation to it being like speaking to a mate in the pub, the more successful you're being at selling. Because we're not trying to question clients for the sake of questioning them. We're trying to converse with them, to listen to them, to understand their pain, understand their problems. Now, as a rep, if you're truly excited and curious and interested about a company's problems, then you're going to be excited and interested and curious about the solution. What we find is the balance tips the other way, which is salespeople are just really excited about the solution. But to really gain trust, you've got to be shown to be trying to understand their business, trying to understand their problem, trying to help them, be driven by curiosity in the way that you're listening to their questions. And I think that's the first thing to start with, is like, truly care about the customer while being yourself. And it will go a long way to building that trust with someone you've never met before and have only spoken to over the phone.
Brilliant stuff. I mean, you probably heard that slight reaction when you said the word hack. I'm
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, people love a hack, don't they? If we can just do something easily, wouldn't life be better?
Well, it reminds me of a friend of mine who's a yoga teacher, which probably won't surprise you from looking at me that I've got friends who are yoga teachers. But he said something really interesting to me, and it resonated with me, where he said he gets people walk into his yoga studio, and he's been doing it for like 20 years. And the first thing they say to him is, can you show me how to do a headstand or a handstand? And he realizes that it took him alone as a yoga teacher probably 2 or 3 years to perfect that art. And a lot of the time nowadays, people just want to get to the exciting end result without the journey itself, and they're far too destination focused. And I find that's a lot in sales training as well, is like, how do you sell a product? How do you close? It's like, well, it's the end of doing lots of really important things that take a long time to learn. So yeah, I'm not a big fan of this whole hacking as well. Like, old fashioned, you've got to put the hard yard in, the hard work to get there in the end.
Yeah, I agree. And the other thing you said there is that people get very excited about their solution, or if they sell a product and it's something physical, I think they probably get more excited.
Mm.
And it's tough, isn't it? Because you're not saying don't be excited about it. It's kind of, don't be too excited about it yet. It's quite a fine balance as a trainer to get right, isn't it?
Yeah, and again, like you're spot on in what you're saying, is you want people to be enthused and excited and believe in their product, but there's the right time for all of this stuff, right? And I think I think people overlook sometimes is the reason we do this stuff is because we're trying to solve problems. Fundamentally, what sales is solving problems. The first thing I tell SDRs is, like, I ask the question, why are you calling customers? And they always say, to book a demo. It's like, no, that's an outcome. Like, you're not looking to call customers to book a demo. No one's sitting there going, I can't wait for someone to call me to set a demo with me. But there's lots of people sitting at the moment going, I'm drowning. Like, I need help. If someone can come and reach out and give me some help, I'd give them the time and the money and the motivation to go and purchase their product. So I guess we've got to think about the reason we're selling in the first place is that we are trying to solve customers' product problems, and we've got to gain the trust to learn about those customer problems. And once we've learned about them, we then have enough trust to actually show them how we can help them. So it's more diagnostic than just going in there and showing them a product.
So again, if I paraphrase, just double check my understanding, by caring about them, by asking about the problem and the things that we're probably going to need anyway, that in itself builds the trust, and the customer, the person speaking to you, thinking, yeah, I can work with this guy, I can work with this organization.
Absolutely, yeah, of course. I mean, look, particularly if you've got a problem that you don't know what the solution is, if you've got someone who's meticulously listening to your problem and truly trying to understand what the problem is, the root of the problem, the challenges that you're facing, how it's stopping you do certain things, how it's aligning to your business, how it's aligning personally to you, and how it's aligning to your department, then all of a sudden you sound like someone who really cares. But on top of that, you're also setting the customer's mind at ease by saying, look, I hear this problem a lot. Like, this is something that we're solving in the market a lot. It's really good that you've come to me and we're talking about it, because I'm someone who can help you. And then it becomes a practitioner versus a salesperson. And this is, again, something that I'd always recommend, is that the word salesperson is like, it has a negative connotation for customers sometimes. A better way to look at it is that your fundamental role is to qualify pain. And then at the back of it, the last 15, 20% of that is selling a product. So again, it comes back to that problem solving thing. If you're going in there and you're saying, all I'm going to do with this customer now is try and learn as much as I can about their pain and their business, all of a sudden you realize that the customer's sitting there going, do you know what, you really care. And for that reason, like, let's take this conversation further. Obviously, we have to show value along that conversation. We have to let them know that we can help. But ultimately, it's about trying to learn as much as we can about the customer. And I think we forget that sometimes, as I said, and we concentrate too much on ourselves.
How interesting. The last 15-20%. So I mean, really, you're saying totally stack at the front the focus on customer, the thinking about them, listening to it. I'm listening to you. You've used that word about 5 times already.
Mm-hmm.
That seems a hell of a lot.
Well, yeah, but I'm a big believer, and a lot of the material out there shows you that the purchasing takes place in the questioning. The purchasing doesn't take place in the showing of the product. That just dots the I's and crosses the T's. To truly change someone's perspective and someone's mind and show them they've got a problem that's worth investing in, you have to walk them through it. You have to guide them to the answer. Much like coaching, I believe that there's a massive Venn diagram crossover between selling and coaching, and so much of the value comes from the questions you ask versus the things you show. That's just reconfirming the value.
And I agree with you, which is why I asked the question again, just so we could massively underline it.
Okay, good.
No,
the way you were behaving like it was a foreign concept for you, I was like, oh dear.
Oh yeah, gonna have to buy your book, Fred. What have you written in that? Was it written in 1970? Well, to be fair, if it was written in 1970, we'd still talk about benefits, wouldn't it? So
Of course, yeah. Of
no,
course.
I just love it when people are talking like that, and any different way or different words or different angles, which really, as I say, underlines that point. Is, it's music to my ears. But that point you make about sales being like coaching and this overlap, I think that's really interesting. Can you just elaborate a tad more on that as well, please?
Yeah, so if you think about the fundamental principles of coaching, you're trying to walk someone through a thought process to help them realize they either have the answer themselves or they can find the resource to the answer, which is what coaching is, right? Like, I've coached people around stuff I don't know the answer to, but I happen to coach them to a place where they now know the answer because they've been able to find the resource. And this is the same with selling, is that someone might have an implied pain or a surface level issue. Your role as a salesperson is to make them understand what that pain could potentially be, what could happen if they don't address the pain, what the cost of inertia is, what the positive business outcome of solving that pain is, and ultimately walk them to a solution, which should be your product, or sometimes isn't your product now. Sometimes it's your product in a year's time or 6 months' time or 2 years' time. But you're walking them to a point where they're saying ultimately that we address that we have a problem as a business. We address that it's costing us money or it has a negative impact. And we address the fact that we need to show the motivation to solve that problem. And the last part of that, which is classic word by analysis, is we address the fact that you're the product that we should buy. And it comes back to those 3 questions. If you can sit there in a pipeline meeting and answer these questions, why are they buying anything? Why are they buying it now? And why they're buying your product, then you've basically coached them to the answers.
Why are they buying anything? Why are they buying now? And why are they buying your product?
Yeah, so what it comes down to ultimately is the pain, comes down to the urgency and the reason why they need to do it now and the reason they're choosing your product. If you can't articulate that, and what you'll find more than anything is salespeople struggle to articulate the first one, which is why are they buying anything. I sit in pipeline meetings and we sell business intelligence, and you ask that question, why are they buying anything? And they say, well, they want to see business intelligence. So, well, that's an outcome. That's not a reason to buy something. What's the reason they need to see business intelligence? Oh shit, I've never thought of that. I was like, well, look, that's fine. Let's go back and find the answers to that out. But it reveals a lot, right? If you can't articulate the reason someone's buying anything, and ideally some quantifiable reasons as well, so some metrics behind it. And I like to even say the reason they're buying it at 3 levels, like a company level, a departmental level, and individual level. Then they're not really going to buy. They're just sort of interested in looking. They're more curious than serious.
And like you say, that takes a lot of understanding. It takes that time, that investment, if you want to call it that, up front, to really not only get that information for yourself, but help them understand themselves as well, which is the beauty of those powerful questions.
Exactly right.
Which, I mean, I guess in many ways, I mean, just I'm sort of looking at the elements of PQ and the win-win orientation. I mean, you're naturally talking about that rather than me say, tell me about win-win. You're talking about that because everything you're talking here, it's about the customer. What are they getting out of it? Why would they want to? What's their benefit? What's their win?
Yeah, and it's really interesting you say it tying into win-win, because I think sales in general is actually, the focus is never on win-win from a rep point of view. And I think people are targeted on the wrong things that aren't win-win. If there was a shift in paradigm, or I often say to people, your target is a byproduct of both you and the client agreeing that you've got a successful partnership. Like, the target is just a number. That's not a motivation for someone to buy your product. I always say to people, look, you should be having 20 to 25 serious business conversations a week where people are admitting there's a problem. And if you're going to have the next conversation where they're saying admitting that they're motivated to solve the problem, then all of a sudden that shift in focus is actually more around win-win, and it's more customer centric than just, are you hitting your target? Am I making enough calls? We often KPI people on completely the wrong things that aren't going to actually get the right outcomes.
I've now extended this podcast for another 4 hours. No, but what you are saying there is so interesting, that the target's being the wrong thing. And of course, the things that you've said there, so targeting people on successful partnerships, again, music to my ears, and motivating them solving problems, or measuring customers who are motivated to solve problems. Mm-hmm. That's hard to do, isn't it? It's hard to measure that stuff.
No, it's not. I don't think it is. And I think it comes back to sales process, is that there's customer-led actions in a sales process and there's client-led actions in a sales process. And where do you think we spend most of our time? We spend it talking how amazing it is that we've sent a proposal out. Well, I'm not being funny, but I could send you a proposal now, Fred. It doesn't mean anything. However, if I can turn around to you and say 6 customers this week have admitted to us that there is a business case for our product in their company, they've said, yes, we have a business case. That's customer action. They've said, yes, we are. The next one will be along the lines of, the customers have confessed to us that they want to buy the product. They've said to us outright, we would like to buy the product. That's a customer-led action. But that's far more important in the sales process than, oh, I've called 100 people. It doesn't mean anything. Now, again, you have to scrutinize this and you have to get the reps to ask the right questions, but customer-led actions are far more important than client-led, than our led actions. Like, no one cares about what we do. The customer certainly doesn't. We want to be monitoring what the customer's telling us they're doing. That's far more important.
Isn't it? Oh, I love it. Again, music to my ears. We are so much on the same page here. I'm just asking these questions just to. I need so many things underlined in this, because it's great stuff. And I guess then, if we put ourselves led by them, then again, I'm just looking at the elements of PQ. We do become more interdependent, because I'm doing stuff which is going to benefit you. Of course, if you coming back and working with me, yeah, I'll benefit as well. It's the whole teamwork thing, isn't it? We are naturally working together.
Yeah, and again, we can put processes in place to actually harness that and execute on that. So things like engagement plans and close plans should be mutual plans, where there's a load of stuff for us to do and a load of stuff for you to do. And we're going to be accountable to those tasks as well, with the end goal of you purchasing the product, but more importantly, you extracting value from the product. So you get your value and I get my money. Simple. It's so simple. Obviously, the problem is that the variables in it are humans, which is the customer and yourself and all the other different people involved in a buying process. And we have to manage those. And this is where EQ is really important in this process as well, and building relationships and trust, like we spoke about before. And also, like, being flexible, driving urgency in the right way. And that comes back to trust again, is that urgency is one of the easiest things to fake, and clients can see through fake urgency so quickly. If I see another, if you buy this, you get a free toaster, but you got to buy it now. It's like, well, I know you're going to offer me that same deal tomorrow. Rather, there was genuine urgency, which is like my compelling event. If I don't buy it now, I'm going to lose another X amount of money within my business, because it's my compelling event versus yours.
And very interesting the way that you described I think you said mutual close plan, mutual action plan. I mean, I actually wouldn't call it mutual close plan, because I think your point was that when they are extracting value from it, not when they've placed the order with me and I can say, see ya, bye.
Yeah.
It's you're getting this stuff from it, you're reaping the rewards, and actually that's going to lead into the longer term business anyway, isn't it?
Of course, yeah. Of course.
So, no, brilliant stuff. Okay, so kind of trust threads its way all the way through these elements, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And for me, this is quite an important part of trust, which is with honesty. And so just looking at the way that PQ codifies an element of honesty, or certainly the way that I read that, is the self-disclosure and feedback piece, which is having the honesty, or sort of having the bravery, some people might say, in telling customers things that they don't necessarily want to know. Again, I'd love to sort of hear your opinions and thoughts around that.
I think there's two elements to that. I think there's a mindset piece, which I know. I mean, I kind of hate talking about mindset because I think it can be slightly ethereal. I think people are put off by it, where it's basically you telling me I need to work harder. But I don't think necessarily that's true. I think the mindset piece here is, again, it comes back to the salesperson. Like, often the mindset of the salesperson is, I'm subservient to the client. You know, I'm obsequious. I'm your servant, and that's just nonsense. If you're sitting there and you're saying, I know more, or as much or more than the person I'm selling to, but more importantly, I know more about the solution. And on top of that, I'm a peer and an equal to you. So I'm going to learn as much as you are during this process. Then your mindset shifts from, I'm not going to have my time wasted by people, to my time is really valuable and I'm excited about spending it with you. But the second that I feel you're not being honest with me, or I'm not being honest with you, then the kind of relationship's gone. So what do I mean by that? So I always like to start conversations by just calling out the honesty of saying, look, you know, particularly, you know, obviously from a sales perspective, saying that we're going to spend the next 15, 20 minutes together, or half hour together. If there's no value at the end, let's just be really honest with each other. Alternatively, if I sit there going, this product's not right for you, I'm not going to take this conversation further. So my objective is for us to both at the end of this say, I know a bit about your business and you know that I'm the right solution for you. If we can achieve those two things, I think we can take the conversation forward. How does that sound, Fred? Okay, great. Let's do that.
Yeah.
And again, it's like this honesty thing is a two-way street, right? You've got to be authentic and honest with a customer. But when a customer is inauthentic and dishonest to you, you need to call it out. And this is why things like stress testing champions works really well, is that if someone's sitting there going, yeah, I'll speak to my boss at 2:00 on Thursday, I like to flip the accountability onto them. So just to check, you say you're going to speak to them at 2:30 on Thursday. Is there anything that you can envision getting in the way of you having that conversation? No. So we're not going to be sitting here at 5 to 2 on our meeting and you saying, oh, you've not had a chance to speak to me yet, are we? No. Okay, good. Well, look, I'll do the same thing on my training team. I'll go and speak to them straight away to make sure that we get you all set up on what you need. And again, it's that two-way street when it comes to honesty. So I think there's an element of calling out bullshit when you think you hear it, or when your sort of bullshit radar's going off. But there's also treat the client with honesty as well, because it's really transparent when you're not, like particularly around pricing, particularly around you know, dates of closing and building out a process to close. And again, I think you're right in what you said. I think salespeople sometimes are scared of doing it because they think the client is this sort of mythical beast that's held up on a pedestal, and we've got to bend over backwards to make them happy. It's not the case at all. Our job is about qualifying the serious and the curious. The serious we will bend over backwards for and do the right things. The curious will help them to a point, but there comes a point when they've got to be serious about purchasing our product.
I'm going to borrow that. Qualify the serious and curious. I love it. No, and I'd say I think you're dead right. And you know, some people would just not. They'd never can go to the customer and say, you know what, you're really not helping me help you here, or the stuff you're saying to me, I just don't think's right, or how can I add value when you are consistently doing these things which are not, you know, in line with us working properly together. And some people would just be horrified at saying that. But I think being able to feed that back, or, you know, disclose that's how you feel about the situation, is a very strong thing. Very grown up approach, isn't it?
Well, I'll tell you where it's really powerful is in the negotiation, right? So when you're going through a negotiation and it's clear to both parties that you're going through a negotiation, and I just want to be clear about this. Like, obviously, I mean, build value first, but sometimes people don't have the money. Like my opinion, there's three reasons people want to negotiate. Number one, they love negotiating, like myself. If I'm going to buy a cheese sandwich or a car, I love negotiating. But as soon as it's something I want and they tell me that I can't negotiate, I buy it because I love it, right? Number two is that they can't afford the product. So they literally don't have enough money. And number three is they don't see value. We shouldn't be negotiating with people who don't see value. You've made a mistake. You need to go back and build more value. But my point is, with negotiating, I like to call out the negotiation. I often say something like this, which is like, look, I'm conscious of the fact that we're entering a negotiation. So let's just set some ground rules first. There's three rules I like to go through when negotiating, Fred. Number one is that I want us to collaborate in this process. Yeah. Number two, I want us to both leave here with what we both think is acceptable. And number three, I want us to be realistic in this negotiation. If ever I'm breaking one of those rules or you're breaking one of those rules, I think we should call each other out. And then you've just set a framework for negotiating. So as soon as someone goes, we want 50% off, you can say, look, I don't think you're being realistic and I'm not going to leave here with something that I want. And ultimately, I wouldn't say that's collaborative. And vice versa. They've got the opportunity to call you out on those three things as well. And again, fantastic. It's transparent trust. It's transparent trust and honesty.
Love it. Love pre-framing it like that, or setting up those rules, or just establishing this is how we want to do things. And again, if somebody's uncomfortable with that, that's immediately would set the spider senses off, wouldn't it? Going, why do they look, or why do they appear not to want to do it that way?
Yeah, it's a red flag, and I don't want to do business with people like that personally. I don't want to enter into a really like drawn out negotiation where someone's just playing around and they don't have the budget. It's like I'd rather qualify them out of the pipeline.
Fantastic stuff. I know you really wanted to have a talk about, well, all of these elements, but particularly you got your eye on the future orientation part of PQ. Because I was going to say, because you've got some strong opinions on that. Wow, the stuff you've been sharing so far is really, really valuable. So, well, I've had to change pens. I've written like notes as I'm going along, and I have to get another pen. No, but joking apart, the future orientation part. Again, what's your take on that, and how we can help salespeople to become more future oriented?
Yeah, I think what's really interesting, right, is that I think I've noticed with this generation that's coming through the workforce, the most recent one, there's a real compromise around future orientation. Maybe it's a bit more pronounced than previous ones. Maybe I'm just reading into it, but it comes down to like short-term wins and long-term gains, and letting the customer see that as well. And again, negotiations are a really good case in point. Is that I don't know where it's come from, but there doesn't seem to be as much using value as your negotiator anymore. So what you get is people buying your product a lot cheaper. If they buy your product a lot cheaper, they're very unlikely to use it or use it to its maximum capability because they've paid little money for it. And if they're unlikely to use it, they're unlikely to extract value. And if they're unlikely to extract value, they're unlikely to renew your product. And if they're unlikely to renew your product, you're damn sure that you're going to have to make that money up next year through more new business. Now, we were taught this years ago as part of a subscription model. As an example, you were sat down and said, here's the long-term benefit of selling something at a higher price. This is what it means to the business and what we can do with that money in terms of promotions and, pay rises and investments and things like that. And I think that's really cheap in negotiation. The view now is just get the deal in, never leave money on the table. And again, this might be different from organization to organization, but certainly when I was going through when I was contracting, and also a couple of the businesses I've worked at, not so much this one, we're actually moving in the opposite direction. It's about helping the customer see the future of the relationship, right? So working together effectively. And the point here is that cheap doesn't mean good. Like it's like, I'll sell the product cheap, but then I've got to hand this over to an account manager and they've got the impossible task of trying to increase the AOV on that next year. And they've got the impossible task of trying to chase a customer to use it when they've paid so little for it, they're not getting value from it. And I'm always trying to get people to think about the long-term actions of what they're doing. But then when you twin that together, and I think this is probably where it's becomes a little bit more alive, is when you twin that with the customer, when you're thinking about the long term and thinking about building future orientation and working together and this common goal and whatnot. First of all, you have to find out what that goal is, but then you have to find out what the long-term goal is. Like I always talk about in the discovery stage, finding out things from an individual level, a departmental level, and a company level. I want to learn what they're trying to achieve with their business over the next 2 to 3 years. And I want to align our product with that goal. So when their business grows, our product grows and our relationship grows and the inventory that they buy grows and the suite of products that we can offer them to help them grow grows as well, versus just giving them a quick sort of sellotape fix now that's going to get us a bit of money and get the customer buying our product. And again, the way we do that is several ways. First of all, is we get the customer thinking about it in that way, but also we've got to start thinking about the different stakeholders that we engage in that process as well. Like an economic buyer is often a means to an end. Let's just get the economic buyer on so they can sign the check. No. Let's get the economic buyer on so we can learn about what they're trying to achieve. Let's get them on so we can learn about their long-term goals. Let's get them on to learn about why they'd sign the check. What's the value they'd get from signing the check? And again, I think as soon as we can start turning around and saying to businesses, our product isn't something that's going to help you now, it's something that's going to help you for the next 5 years, you've earned the right to ask for a 5-year contract or a 3-year contract versus a 12-month contract. And all of a sudden you find that the organization has got a ton of future bookings. You look like a more interesting proposition to invest in. And you've not got a massive burn rate. You've not got customers leaving after a year and you're trying to make that money up through new business, which is more expensive than retaining customers. And it's just a thought process. It's not, I hope I'm making sense, but it's not about just getting the money in. It's about getting the right type of deal in. And I don't think salespeople think about that enough anymore. I think there's too many mercenaries.
So interesting. Again, we could have another hour just on this, and whether it's generational, whether it's mindset, whether it's training. I mean, so many, the root cause. I guess that's our job to really understand it. But funnily enough, and we were saying before we actually started recording, these things all connected. We're kind of back to the win-win bit. Because we're saying we're going to invest a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of our questioning skills, all that good stuff in making sure customers win is there. In some ways you're saying, but we're just doing the check houses too, because otherwise this is great. We're not a charity though. We've got to make sure there is a proper balance in this. Otherwise, we make our job a lot harder in the long run. And again, let me just double check on something. You think there's a little bit more short-termism in many salespeople at the moment? Like, get the money in, done that, tick that box.
I think it kind of makes sense though. There's the, I speak to SDRs now, and they've not made a booking in their first week or booked a demo in their first week. I'm like, you're probably not going to do it in your first month. And I think this generation has. I don't think it's any fault of their own. There's an instant gratification. I think the studies show it as well, certainly from some of the literature I've read around it, of trying to understand this generation, because we've got 4 different types of generation in the workforce at the moment, probably for the first time ever. And I'm really trying to understand them. But imagine a world at the moment where you post something online and if you don't get a like within the first couple of seconds, you're sort of, you're feeling down. And I think that encourages instant gratification. And I might be generalizing, but I think it is almost necessary when talking about generations is to generalize. And obviously there's going to be outliers, but I think we live in a world now where everything is so immediate that it's difficult to look at the long term. And Fred, I'm sure you're from the same school as me when we started in sales, where the most advanced piece of technology was the telephone and the computer that we had. Now, you can see when a customer's engaging in your content and what parts they're looking at and spending the most time on, and you can get that feedback real time. The tools that are there to help salespeople are encouraging even more instant gratification, which encourages things like speeding a deal up unnecessarily. Sometimes you've got to slow a deal down to go faster. And speed's really important in the sales process because it's urgency applied in the right areas at the right time that's in favor of the customer, not urgency that's applied when you want it that's going to ultimately help you as the person selling the product. Urgency is really important, but it's got to be applied at the right time. And some of the techniques and tactics I see salespeople using to build urgency nowadays are frankly just not very customer centric. It's more about they've got shit pipelines, so they're forcing customers to do wild behaviors to get their deal in. And we've lost some of that pipeline discipline, I think, because we're trying to speed deals up too quickly. If that makes sense. Again, I think I'm chucking a few generalizations in there, but I think it's important.
No, and for the sake of the time that we've got and the sort of the general concepts, and then of course I was joking, but we could very, very easily go into depth on many of the things that you've said on this. Even just that whole instant gratification thing. and where's that from? And yeah, apps and things, they go beep and they go buzz and they put little blue lights and red lights and whatever, and it's a real thing, it's a real thing. And then having these four, you do have to generalize to give you some kind of framework to try and get your head around it in the job you do, to try to help them. And then you get all that's just understanding each of the four. And then one type is selling to another type, and then another is the customer of the other. And wow,
Exactly.
the number of dimensions we got to get our heads around is it's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's interesting.
It's interesting. Yeah.
It's fascinating. You use sort of technology as an example, and I see it in technology where if I text my wife's mum, my mother-in-law, she takes a week to get back to me. Whereas if I text my nephew, he's, before I'm even finishing the sentence, he's already getting back to me because he's seeing that I'm typing something, and you see those idiosyncrasies magnified through technology, and exactly what you're saying. Like, we've got 22-year-old kids selling to 70-year-old people now, and that's fascinating dynamic. And at some point, those idiosyncrasies of their generation come out. And we've got to learn to combat them, or at least align to the way the client wants to be sold to.
Aligned to the way the client wants to be sold to. That is again, you give me some cracking one-liners here. I tried to pick one just to put as the title, and you're really giving me a hard job here, which is great. I really appreciate it.
You're making me blush, Fred. You need to stop.
This is why you did put the camera on, isn't it? No, but I'm generally grateful for very generous amount of stuff you're sharing. Look, we've got to be disciplined here. I really could go on, and I suspect we probably will. But just on a personal point of view, then let me start to wrap it up for the sake of discipline, and not open another little sort of mini can of worms that we could riff on. What about yourself? What about yourself for the future? Where do you see yourself going? What's next?
Well, it's interesting because I show a distinct lack of ambition, but for all the right reasons. Is that the job that I do now I absolutely love. And someone asked me 5 years ago, where are you going to be in 5 years? I always say, hopefully doing the same job I'm doing now, maybe for a different organization. But my job role hasn't actually changed that much over the last 8 or 9 years, because I get a real satisfaction out of the role that I have. And it ticks all of my motivations in terms of working with people, helping improve people, learning along the way. So I learn an absolute ton every single day. And also, aligning to big, scary business goals and big organizational change. If I can satisfy those needs, then I'll do this job for the rest of my life, really. So I have no ambitions of moving into the C-suite. I have no ambitions of running my own business again. I have no ambitions of conquering the world. I really, really get a kick out of my job, and I always say my head springs off the pillow every morning knowing that I'm part of someone somewhere's personal growth. I really enjoy it in a non-narcissistic way, in a kind of, hopefully in a humble way, but it can be perceived as that sort of addicted to helping people, sort of narcissism. But no, I truly love my job, and I'm very, very lucky that I've worked for organizations that have enabled me to do it.
I know exactly what you mean. That's your comment, that's your like, that's your beep, that's your thumbs up. Knowing that you've helped somebody, and the stuff that you've laid out and how you can help with all of these things you've been talking about for the last 40 minutes, that's a big job. It is. Even that last thing, that 4 generations working with each other. I mean, hell of a challenge. That's fantastic. And look, listening to what you're saying there, and then hearing the enthusiasm in that, I know that you'll do a good job in that. And certainly all the best from me in doing it.
Well, thank you. That's very kind of you to say.
But no, thank you so much for your time. Really do appreciate that. And I'm sure we'll catch up again pretty soon to see how we're both progressing.
Awesome. Well, if anyone wants to follow me on LinkedIn, just look me up. It's Erin Evans at Global Data. I try and share one sales tip a day, just to sort of, share with the community and hopefully spark some interesting debate. And I know obviously you're heavily involved in some of those debates as well, which is great to see some of your contributions and questions. So let's give as much as we can to this community and lift everyone up and help anyone, particularly during these difficult times.
Yeah, we will pop that link into the notes, and I would definitely recommend people follow you on that and connect, because that's what we were saying just before we came on, wasn't it? You do put some good stuff up there, which just gets the brain, the old grey matter working every day. So thank you so much, and really appreciate it.
My pleasure, and thanks for all the stuff you're doing as well with the community and things like the podcast and the wonderful book you've written as well. So I'm sure everyone really appreciates it.
Oh, now you're making me blush. Right, we'll draw an end here. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Thank you for listening to the Selling Through Partnering Skills podcast with me, Fred Copestake. If you liked it, why not leave a review? If you didn't, also leave one. Remember, it's all about the feedback. If you want to learn more about your own PQ, why not go to the book website, which is www.throughpartnering.co.uk, and there you can take a little self-audit. And of course, if you want to get in touch to talk about how you can use partnering skills, you can find me on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. So until next time, keep thinking about how you can adopt a more modern and collaborative approach to selling by selling through partnering skills.